Hi, today I'm going to show you how to do stencil printmaking. So first of all, you'll need 4 sheets of A4 computer paper for your stencils. You're going to want to trim off about 1 to 2 centimeters on each side. The reason is we want the stencils to be a little bit smaller than the paper we're going to print on, and you'll see why in a couple minutes. So just trace a line and then you can use the scissors to cut it. Some of you might have a cutter at home, like an X-Acto knife, and that's very useful. If you don't, you can use scissors, either way. Now you have to add a dot to the corner, the bottom right corner on every single piece of paper. And the reason you do that is to help you know which side is up and which side is down when you're printing, and so you don't accidentally mess up and print something the wrong way. Alright, one of these sheets of paper is going to be your key drawing. The other 3 will be your stencils. So the first thing you have to do is your key drawing. It's called the key because it's the key to everything else in the print. Make sure you leave space around the edges because you're going to be cutting stencils, and stencils can't go all the way to the edge. I've drawn a houseplant with some details on it. Once you finish with your drawing, you're going to be making stencils. Each stencil is a separate color. That's why we call them color separations. So take one piece of paper at a time, put it on top, making sure the dots are both on the bottom right corner. Now you'll trace the first color that you're doing. I'm doing brown. Alright, now we grab another sheet of paper, again, making sure the bottom dots are lined up on the bottom right corner. Now I will do the second color, which is dark brown. I will take our third piece of paper, and you want to really make sure that they're lined up perfectly, that the edges and all the corners of the papers are lining up. Otherwise it'll print off later. So my next color is going to be light green. Half of the plants are going to be light green and the other half will be dark green, but I'm having trouble tracing the details. So here's something you can do if you're having trouble. You can tape it to a window, and you can use the window like it's a light box. Now you can go ahead and trace. Next color is the dark green. So I put on the first sheet of paper from the beginning. As you can see, I've already traced the bottom of the flower pot. I've put 2 stencils on one piece of paper, so I have to leave a little gap. Okay, the last color is red. I'm going to put the red on the same piece of paper as the dark brown. See, I can use 5 stencils on 3 pieces of paper. So not every stencil has to have its own piece of paper. Alright, now I'm going to list them in order. So that one, light brown is first, dark brown is second, dark green goes next, because I want to print the light green on top of the dark green. They're going to overlap, and you'll see in a minute. And then finally the red details are the last layer. On my key drawing, I'm going to write the key to this. I'm going to say the order of all the colors so it'll help me later when I'm printing if I forget which order to print in. Again, if you want something to be underneath, you should print it first, and then if you want something on top, you should print it later. Okay, now I have all my stencils and my keys. I have to prepare my papers I'm going to print on. So you should see what you have left. You might have watercolor paper left, you might have acrylic paper left. Anything's okay. If you don't have any of these papers left, you can just use computer paper or cut out paper from your sketchbook. You can also mix and match. You can do a couple sheets of acrylic and a couple sheets of watercolor, it's fine. Alright, so now I'm ready for my paper, and I have to make my registration marks. Registration marks are very important in printmaking. They're what help you know how to line everything up. So first of all, I'm going to trace the corners. And I'm also then going to draw little lines on the side and then make a plus mark. These plus marks will help me line them up later. So you want to do that to all three of your nice papers. Again, I'm adding corners and the side with the plus sign. Since there's already part of the plus sign on the key, I just extend that onto the paper. And then I add a dot in the corner. Oops, I forgot a dot on the first one. You don't want to forget the dots. And then I'll add it to the third piece of paper. Okay, so now I have to add registration marks onto my stencils. So I find where the little plus marks are, and I extend them onto the paper of the stencil. I want it to be lined up pretty good, so then I just extend the plus mark onto my paper. That way I know how to line them up when I'm printing. Take your time, do this part slowly, because this is what's going to determine how well everything lines up later. Okay, now we're going to paint backgrounds onto our nice printing papers. I'm using watercolor for these first two. Then for the last one, I'm going to use coffee. Alright, while the backgrounds are drying, I'm going to cut my stencils. I have a cutter, which is very convenient, so if you have one, I suggest you use it. However, you might not, in which case you can use the scissors. If you need to cut out a hole in a piece of paper, what you can do is fold the paper and then cut in the middle of the shape where the fold is. Then stick your scissors into the hole. Then cut out your shape. Take your time with this step. Alright, now I have my 3 pieces of paper with 5 stencils on them. Alright, my backgrounds are dry. This is what they look like. This is the coffee one. Alright, so first we want to do when we start printing is to tape down our paper. If we use the tape directly, it'll be too sticky and it might ruin our paper. So that's why it's good to rub it on your sweater so that it gets less sticky and then it won't damage your paper. Now I'm going to line up my stencil onto the print. But now I'm noticing that it's not lining up very well in the corners. Why could that be? Wait, it's because I messed up. The dot is there. The dot is supposed to be down there. Oops, so now I have to flip it. This is why we do the dots. Now it lines up much better. So always check that the dots are lining up. This is what it should look like, where the registration marks are lining up. And on the corners, it should look like this. And then finally, you'll see the corner with the dots. See how they both have the dots? That's what you're looking for. All right, so now once you're happy, tape it down. Now we're going to mix our paint colors. So I want to make a brown first. Now I'm going to take a sponge. I've cut it up into little pieces so I can do each color with a different sponge piece. Now you put it into the paint and then you tap it off the excess, because if you go straight from the paint to your printing, it's going to be too much paint and it's going to make a mess. So you don't want it to be too much, that's why you get rid of some. And then if you need more, you just go back and get some more. So just go over the whole thing. Try to smooth it out as much as you can. It's okay if it gets a little bit into the shape above it, because we're going to print over that later anyway. All right, let's see how it looks. Let's peek. Ooh, that looks really nice. If you don't like it, then you can keep going, but I like it, so I'm going to take it off. Now we want to print the brown layer on all three to start, while the paint is still wet. So grab the next one, and once again you're going to have to line up your stencil. So the same stencil we just used, line it up, tape it down, and sponge it again. This time I want to do a little more creative sponging. Instead of doing a whole even layer, I'm going to do thicker on one side and thinner on the other side. This way it'll look like there's a light source. As you can see, it goes darker on the left side and it's lighter on the right side. Okay, so I have to do the last one in the light brown color. Now the nice thing about this strategy is that by the time you're done with the third print, the first print will be dry already and you can put on the second layer. So that looks good. You can see how all three look. And you can take a picture of your progress. All right, now we're going to mix dark brown. Basically, I just added blue to the brown I already had to make it darker. I'm feeling it to make sure it's dry. Okay, it's dry. If it's wet, you shouldn't print it because then it'll smudge. All right, so we want to be really precise again. Take your time, get it in the right spot, and tape it down. All right, now I have a new sponge piece. You can also wash and reuse the sponge pieces, but you don't want them to be wet. You want them to be dry. Okay, one by one, we add the second layer, the dark brown layer. And that's what all three prints look like with 2 layers. All right, now it's time to do the third layer, which is going to be dark green. I want to do the dark green first because it's going to be underneath, and the light green will be printed on top. I didn't mix enough colors, so I have to mix some more. Alright, that's what the third layer looks like on all three. Now it's time for the fourth layer, which is going to be the light green. So basically I add white to the green I already had, and a little yellow also. Sponge it on top, so now it's overlapping on top of the dark green. I peek, I don't like it, so I put it back. Alright, that's what it looks like now with 4 layers. We have 1 layer to go, which is the red. I want a little green in my red so it doesn't look too saturated. There we have it. There are our 3 final prints. Now we have to trim them down because they have their registration marks on them. So if you just have a scissors, you can trace it with a ruler or anything else that's straight like a magazine, and then cut it in a straight line. But if you have a cutter, then you can line your ruler up with the registration marks and cut it with the cutter. Do it to all 3. We have one last step, which is to label them. So you're making an addition. There's 3 of them, so you should label them 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, and 3 out of 3. That way people will always know that you only made 3, and it's a limited edition. So here's the key drawing. Here's the stencils from layers 1 and 3, stencils 2 and 5, and stencil 4. Here's what the final prints came out like.